Blood in the Library by Dahl. Illustrated by Bradford, Kendall. Chapter 1. Heartbeat. Deep within the Library of Doom, someone is bleeding. A young man stands on a ladder. He stares at his hand. Blood oozes from his finger. It stains his white glove. The young man is Alonzo, one of the sub-librarians. He is working in one of the deepest levels of the great library. Alonzo stares at his finger. "Stupid paper cut," he says. Alonzo doesn't remember getting the paper cut, but he has been working with books all night. He hears a sound that reminds him of a heartbeat. Doom, doom, doom. The sound throbs in his head. The ladder vibrates. Then Alonzo hears the voices. Chapter 2. The Archivists. Alonzo quietly climbs down his ladder. He follows the echoing voices down several dark hallways. Soon, he comes to a window with metal bars. Alonzo peers down through the bars. He sees shadows moving on the floor of the room. It is a circle of tall, thin men. Alonzo recognizes them. They are the Archivists. Day and night, the Archivists wander through the Library of Doom. They never sleep. They never eat. They make sure that every book is in its place. If they notice one book missing, they report it to the librarian. The men are arguing with a young woman. She is the specialist. "He can't be gone," shouts the specialist. "We have not heard from the librarian in many months," says one of the tall men. Another archivist nods his long, thin head. "Something is wrong," he says. "I fear it can mean only one thing. The librarian is dead." Chapter 3. Foe. Dead? Alonzo feels a cold chill in his heart. Then he hears the drumming again. Doom. 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 The Archivists are still talking. "The last we heard from the librarian," says one, "he was heading toward the under-library." Yes, says another. "He heard that the eraser is inside." "The eraser?" asks the specialist. Alonzo knows that name. The eraser is the librarian's deadliest foe. An archivist steps forward. "The eraser is planning to destroy our oldest books," he says. "But how could the eraser break into the library?" asks the specialist. Watching from the window, Alonzo knows the answer to her question. A voice seems to speak in his mind. The eraser slipped in through a bookworm hole. Alonzo gasps. How does he know that? The archivists and the specialist hear the gasp. They look up. Alonzo ducks down below the window. "We have no time to lose," he hears the specialist say. We must enter the underlibrary and find the librarian." "It is too late," says one of the tall men. "It is never too late," says the specialist. Alonzo runs away from the window and down the dark hall. He must save the librarian. Chapter 4. Travel Book. The underlibrary is far below the main rooms of the Library of Doom. Its 7 levels are buried beneath layers of burning rock. "I have to get there fast," Alonzo tells himself. But how? He doesn't have powers like the specialist and the librarian do. It could take him hours to reach the buried rooms of the underlibrary. Alonzo runs down the hall. He sees a huge book in a corner. "Of course," he says aloud. He runs over to the book. On its cover are the words, "Short Stories." Alonzo opens the heavy cover. He sees a dark hole. "This will take me there in no time," he says. Then Alonzo jumps into the hole. Volumes of short stories are scattered throughout the huge library. The books shorten the stories that a person has to travel through. The hole that Alonzo is falling through passes through hundreds of levels in the main library. It reaches down to the underlibrary. In a few seconds, Alonzo's feet hit the floor of a shadowy room. He lands with a thud. Ugh! His hands hit the stone floor. He is on the first story of the underlibrary. Alonzo looks at his finger. It has stopped bleeding. The blood reminds him of something. But what? He stands still and listens. All he can hear is the strange heartbeat sound. Doom. 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 He sees a faint glow in the distance. The heartbeat grows louder. Alonzo walks toward the light. The light comes from a giant reading room. Candles burn in iron chandeliers hanging from the ceiling. Alonzo sees the specialist. Her back is to him. She is facing a man with greenish skin and sad eyes. The man has black hair that moves and flickers like a dark flame. "You don't belong here, Eraser," says the specialist. Alonzo hides and watches from the shadows. He sees the man smile. "You think you can defeat me?" asks the man. "You'll just end up like he did," the eraser says. The eraser points to a tall mound of books lying next to him. Sticking out from the bottom of the pile is a gloved hand. Alonzo recognizes the glove. It belongs to the librarian. The specialist rushes to the mound. She shoves the heavy books aside. The body of the librarian lies beneath them. "Watch your fingers," says the eraser, "or you'll suffer the same fate." "Fingers?" wonders Alonzo. "What are you talking about?" demands the specialist. The eraser laughs. "The powerful librarian died from something oh so small," he says. A paper cut. Suddenly, Alonzo feels sick to his stomach. "That's impossible," cries the specialist. "He's not breathing, is he?" says the eraser. The eraser picks up one of the books that had been lying on the librarian. It wiggles in his hand. "It was all part of my plan to get rid of him," says the eraser. "I left a book with steel edges lying open. I knew that the librarian would want to look through it, especially since I told him that it held the key to my plan, which it did." As soon as he cut his finger, a drop of blood oozed out, says the eraser. "These books smell blood from miles away. I placed a curse on them. Find the blood of the librarian and attack. Attack until the heart stops beating." Still hidden in the shadows, Alonzo feels as if 1,000 insects are crawling on his skin. His thoughts are confused. Where am I? He wonders. The sound in his ears grows louder. Doom, doom, doom. "My book swarm found him. They sucked the life out of him," says the eraser. His strange black hair flickers angrily. "And now the Library of Doom is at my mercy." Chapter 6. The Curse and the Cure. "Never!" shouts the specialist. Raging fire blazes from her fingers and shoots toward the eraser. The eraser laughs. He raises his hands, and the flames disappear. "You'll need more than that to defeat me," he says. "Then how's this?" Alonzo shouts. He steps forward out of the shadows. He points his hand at the eraser. Golden flames burst from the finger that had been bleeding before. Alonzo's flames join those of the specialist. They twist together into a burning, flickering chain. "The librarian can never be terminated," said Alonzo. "He can never be fired. But you can." Flames surround the shrieking eraser. "No!" he screams. The eraser is trapped within a fiery gold cage. The specialist glances up at Alonzo. "Who are you?" she asks. Alonzo drops to his knees, exhausted. "I'm a sub, he begins. "Substitute?" asks the specialist. Alonzo looks up at her. His face brightens. He smiles. "Exactly," he says. "I'm a substitute." Alonzo looks at the body of the librarian. My body, he thinks. The eraser's curse said to find the blood and attack. His book creatures could only attack my body, Alonzo says. The specialist stares at the young man. "What are you saying?" she asks. "Nothing can destroy the heart of the librarian," says Alonzo. "If I had a new shape, I wouldn't be the librarian anymore, would I? At least, I wouldn't be the librarian under the curse." The specialist stands up. "You mean," she says, "that you are—" "The librarian?" finishes Alonzo. "Yes, that was my plan. After I cut my finger, I knew I couldn't outrun the eraser's creatures, says Alonzo. My only way to escape was to become someone else, someone that the eraser would never suspect. Suddenly, the body on the floor is gone. Light fills the room. The specialist sees the librarian standing next to her. I can't believe that was you, she says. The librarian smiles. Don't judge a book by its cover, he says.